Chapter 2. I thought I was a goner. We set off into the sea, riding atop Sway's enlarged form. I never imagined a dungeon could have a floor like this, I muttered to myself as I gazed at the vast, cobalt-blue seascape spreading out in all directions around me. Fell, who had apparently heard me, let out a snort. "This is the first time I have encountered a floor of this nature as well," he said. "Better still, I sense a number of foes worth battling scattered around this vicinity. This dungeon will indeed be worth the trip." "What do you mean, worth the trip? And don't grin like that when you're saying this stuff. It's really freaking me out." By Fell's standards, foes worth battling would almost certainly turn out to be absurdly dangerous monsters, so I wasn't at all happy to hear that piece of news. "I can't say I ever thought a dungeon like this could exist either," Gun commented, joining in on the conversation. "So there are corners of this world that not even its most long-lived fossil has seen? Then I suppose there truly is still novelty to be found. Especially within dungeons. I will never tire of them, so long as there are still new discoveries like this one to be made," Fell declared, his eyes glimmering with enthusiasm. "You can say that again," Dora-chan said. "I never bothered with them back when I was on my own, but all it took was going into one to sell me on how fun they could be. Ha ha. You really have turned into a dungeon lover too, huh, Dora-chan? Becoming his familiar has allowed me easy access to the dungeons within human towns, as well. A valuable benefit indeed. I intend to make use of it at every opportunity. And, of course, to seek out untouched dungeons such as this one," Fell said, to Gan and Dora-chan's immediate approval. "Sway wants to go into lots of dungeons too," Sway chimed in telepathically from beneath us. I, of course, found the prospect of going along on their dungeon tour to be deeply upsetting. Meanwhile, in the other half of our party. "What do you think, Theodora? Can you make the shot?" Gadino said, pointing at the silhouette of a rather sizable fish a ways off in the ocean. "Easy," Theodora replied. She narked an arrow, took aim, and loosed it toward the fish. FWSH. Scoring a direct hit, the fish's outline vanished, quickly replaced by its drop items. "Here you go." Which Sway then scooped up out of the water with a tentacle along with Theodora's arrow, dropping them all on its back. "Thanks, Sway," I called down. Ark had made something of a breakthrough after the incident on the island and were now making an effort to hunt as we made our way through the sea. Recovering the drops from their targets, however, had proved to be something of a dead end, so I'd enlisted Sway to help out by running collection duty. It wasn't a completely one-sided arrangement. Of course, most of the Fish Ark's members took down dropped, well, fish, which they offered to me as ingredients. The fish that Theodora had just shot had dropped what looked an awful lot like a salmon fillet, in fact. They'd at least obtained a few non-food drops, though, including the shells of monsters that looked like smallish sea turtles, which were supposedly quite valuable, hence the contented smiles on their faces. "Chem? What's that over there?" Sigvard said. He'd been keeping an eye out for potential prey and was now frowning as he peered at the water's surface. The rest of Ark's members and I all gathered around, looking in the same direction. "Huh? A dog?" I said in disbelief. There was just no way a dog would be swimming around in the middle of the ocean, and yet there one was. "Fool. A mere dog would never be found in a place such as this," Fell snapped, mercilessly shooting down my first impression. Well, yeah, I know that. That's why I'm so surprised," I shot back. Rationally speaking, it had to be some sort of monster. It was just the fact that it was a type none of us had seen before, and the way that its head looked pretty much exactly like a dog's, that was throwing all of us off so much. "Oh, that would be a cetus," Gun said. "Wait, you know what they are, Gun?" I asked. Leave it to the party elder to have that sort of trivia in his back pocket. "They are seabound monsters," Gun explained. "And, more importantly, you'd all do well to stay on guard. After all, they tend to travel in packs." No sooner had the words left Gun's mouth than another dog-like face emerged from the sea, and another, and another. The next thing I knew, we were completely surrounded by a horde of cetuses. Master, can Sway beat them up? Why yeah, good plan. Take 'em out, Sway. Okay. Take this. Grelp, a cetus yelped as one of Sway's tentacles pierced straight through it. W will help too, I shouted. There were just so many of them, I felt the need to pull my mithril spear out from my item box and steel myself for battle. That goes without saying. Sway would fare well enough on its own, but numbers such as these would slow us down, Fell said with a wave of his foreleg. That casual motion was all it took to carve deep trenches in the water's surface, quickly followed by a red stain spreading across the path they'd traveled. Indeed. They would cause quite the delay, and worse still, they have our scent. We'll be better off finishing them off here and now, Gun added. He shot a glare at one of the cetuses, which was immediately swallowed up into a whirlpool that appeared out of nowhere in the sea. The vortex turned a sickening blood-red too before I knew it. Hey, leave some for me, Dora-chan shouted before conjuring a few of his signature ice pillars and shish kebabbing several cetuses at once. Do not be careless, Fell barked at ARC's members. Look, they are climbing aboard. That snapped the four of them out of their daze and back to attention. I looked as well and found that a cetus really was clambering its way up onto Sway's big, round body. Ooh, that's nasty, I muttered. The cetus's face looked as dog-like as ever when it was out of the water, but everything beneath that looked close to the body of a dolphin or a whale. It wasn't exactly a pleasant sight. Oh, gross. Back in the water with you, you twisted freak, Gideon shouted with horror as he jabbed the monster with his spear. The cetus let out a sharp and really off-putting howl that I knew I'd be hearing again in my nightmares as it plunged back into the ocean. Don't let them up here. Everyone, pick a side and drive them off, yelled Gadino. Gideon, Sigvard, and Theodora all followed his lead, splitting up to drive away the creatures, and I joined in as well. Fell, Gan, Dora-chan, and Sway had the wide-scale attacks covered, so the five of us focused all our attention on making sure that none of the cetuses managed to climb up Sway and cause any problems at close range. Finally, the last of the cetuses that had all but buried us fell, vanishing moments later. Ugh, I'm exhausted, I groaned as I sprawled out on Sway's back. The members of ARC plopped down as well. They must have been pretty worn out too. Such a trivial encounter should not cause you to groan so mightily. You are as weak as ever, Fell snidely commented as he looked down at me. Yeah, I'm a weakling, I get it. How many times have I told you not to judge me by your standards? I shot back. Also, why didn't you tell me there were monsters like that out here? This ocean's terrifying. Master, look, Sway said as it extended a tentacle up out of the ocean. It was carrying something that looked like a hide, at a glance. What's this, a drop item? There were a whole bunch of them, but Sway couldn't pick them all up. Sway's sorry. Oh, it's fine. I wasn't expecting anything at all, actually, so I'm just glad you picked up what you could. Thanks, Sway. I counted up Sway's haul and found that it had picked up 16 cetus hides in total. I wanted to give them all to ARC, but they insisted that they'd barely helped in the fight and shot that idea down. I countered by reminding them that my party had no interest in anything that wasn't edible, noting that, frankly, I'd been much less helpful than the four of them had. It took a little arguing, but in the end, we agreed to split the loot 50-50. I had to reiterate the point about us being on the same team again and essentially force them to take their half, but thankfully they seemed more or less convinced by the end of it all. Fell and the others had made the fact that they didn't want anything to do with the hides very clear, so the fewer I had to deal with, the better. Really, I just wanted to feel my feet on solid ground again more than anything. Hey, Fell, how far away is the next island? I asked. Far, Fell bluntly replied, then paused and peered out into the distance. Chem. Sway, take us in that direction. Over there. Not straight ahead. We shall take a slight digression from the path forward. Simply follow my directions. Okay. Hey, Fell, is your digression what I think it is? Oh ho. Yes, that is quite the presence. I paused for a moment to let that sink in. Wait. Where are you taking us, Fel? As I already stated, I am leading us on a slight digression. Worry not. Funny how nothing makes me worry more than Fel telling me not to worry. I knew this was a mistake. We never should have come to this dungeon. Oh gods, we're deed. Gra. Eek. The members of ARC, each of them a battle-tested veteran adventurer in their own right, were screaming their lungs out in frantic terror. What did I do to deserve this? I wailed. Fel, Gan, I don't care which of you gets us out of this, but just hurry up and do it already. A massive whirlpool was swirling around with a thunderous roar, and we were currently being dragged down into it. The members of ARC and I had fallen prone, clinging to Sway's massive form for dear life and shouting like we'd never shouted before. Needless to say, this was all Fel's fault. His so-called slight digression had led us to this stretch of the ocean and subsequently right into our current predicament. Hey, Fel, remember when you said, I am leading us on a slight digression? Worry not. Because I sure do. I remember that very well, Fel. I screamed internally, still clutching at Sway like my life depended on it. Hey, you guys okay down there? Dora-chan called out. Fel is with them. They're perfectly all right, I'm certain, Gun casually replied. They were up in the sky, watching from on high as we were swept around in circles by the whirlpool's current. I hope you two don't think I'm gonna brush off the fact that you flew your way out of this disaster the second it started, because I'm definitely remembering this. Master, Uncle Fel, we're spinning so fast. This is so much fun. Sway's voice rang out in my head. It sounded just as relaxed about the whole affair as Dora-chan and Gun. In fact, it was enjoying what was happening. Sway sounded like a little kid having a blast on a piece of playground equipment. What exactly is so fun about these? You're getting way too blasé about mortal danger, Sway. This isn't a game, Sway. We're about to get eaten by a monster. We are in big trouble, I shouted. The party slime was so unmoved by the terrible danger we were in, I had to wonder if it actually understood what was going on at all. It'll be okay, Master. Sway'll beat it up for you. Sway replied with an air of enthusiastic confidence. I wasn't so sure about that. Sway could be as confident as it wanted, but I just couldn't see a slime beating up a creature like that, no matter how I looked at it. The monster in question was downright hideous, even at a distance. It was dread distilled. It lay at the very center of the whirlpool, its massive, sea anemone-like mouth packed full of razor-sharp teeth. Said mouth was gaping open, clearly waiting for its meal to plop right into its jaws. If its mouth alone was that huge, I could only imagine how gargantuan the body beneath the water's surface was. It certainly didn't help that the teeth themselves were moving, clacking together in what seemed like anticipation of making a light snack out of our whole party. Gah! I can't take this anymore. I'm so dead. Oh, wow, is this what people mean when they talk about their life flashing before their eyes? A sequence of images was playing out in my mind's eye, starting from my very earliest memories from shortly after my birth. My elementary school days made an appearance next, followed by memories of middle school, high school, and college, and then my acceptance into a company, my time as a white-collar office worker, and finally my abrupt abduction into another world. That, of course, was followed by my meetings with Fel, Sway, Dora-chan, and Gun. Sure, I ended up in another world against my will, but I can't say I've had a totally terrible time here. It was nice, even, but I guess that's all over. I was going to get sucked into the gaping maw below me and torn to shreds between its horrible, gnashing teeth. That was the only future I could possibly envision for myself anymore. Be silent. Did I not tell you there was no need for concern? Fel said. He'd been wordlessly standing by throughout the whole situation up until that point, completely indifferent to the danger we were in. There is so much need for concern. How the hell am I supposed to not be concerned? We're gonna die. We're screwed. I wailed. We were still spinning our way down into the whirlpool throughout that whole exchange, getting closer and closer to the mouth of doom. Fel, Sway, Dora-chan, Gun, Living in this world hasn't been all sunshine and rainbows, but when all's said and done, I'm still glad I met you guys. Goodbye. I blurted out. I really did think I was a goner, and those words, my final words, I figured had slipped out before I even realized it. Fel heaved a sigh. What are you saying? Just listening to you is an exercise in embarrassment. You are not going to die yet. Barely an instant later, a tremendous, roaring crash rang out, followed by a series of sharp crackling noises. A massive bolt of lighting had fallen from the sky, slamming directly into the mouth at the center of the whirlpool. A couple minutes after that, it was all over. The whirlpool had vanished without a trace, leaving us floating on a perfectly still and silent sea. The members of ARC and I were flabbergasted. All we could do was sit there in dumbfounded shock at the sudden change. Oh, it's over already? Sway was having fun spinning around. Sway moaned. Nah, Sway, this is a good thing. A monster was causing that whirlpool, after all, Dora-chan chimed in. And a mighty monster, at that. Quite impressive to finish it in a single blow, Fel Gun added. Chimpate. Simplicity itself, Fel proudly replied. Oh, that mean you know what that monster was, Gun? Indeed. And you too, Fel? I do not. I know, however, that if that was enough to slay it, it was hardly a foe worthy of concern. Ha. Classic Fel. Okay, Gun, spit it out. What was that? Yeah. Sway wants to know what sort of monster it was too. I suppose it's no surprise that you wouldn't know of them, Dora, nor Sway or Fel, for that matter. You've all been to the sea, yes, but not the open sea, where they tend to live. They're called. Oh, what were they called? Oh, come on, Gun. Seriously. Perhaps your many, many years have at long last rendered you senile? How rude. And you're hardly one to talk about being ancient, Fel. The monster's name has simply slipped my mind, that's all. Let me see. I do believe it started with a C, C-A, Charybdis. Yes, that was it. It was a monster called a Charybdis. They are enormous, and terribly slow as a result. They tend not to move much, instead consuming anything and everything that approaches them. Not even the likes of a sea serpent could hold out against a Charybdis's assault for long. Oh, not even a sea serpent, you say? A Charybdis. I shall remember this. Meanwhile, ARC's members and I were standing off to the side in dumbstruck silence. The four of them couldn't hear my familiar's conversation, of course, but I sure could. You realize that I was positive I was gonna die, right? Why do you guys have to be so casual about this? And also, wait, are you telling me you steered us toward that monster when you didn't even know what it was, Fel? Don't do that. I slumped over with exhaustion, falling flat on Sway's back. What else was I supposed to do? Found it. Uncle Fel, look. The big baddie you just beat dropped these, Sway said as it poked one of its tentacles up from the water's surface. They are not edible, clearly, and as such are of no interest to me. Let him deal with them. Mas dear. Uncle Fel says he doesn't want these. Huh. I grunted as Sway laid a trio of items out before me, a tooth, a treasure chest, and a magic stone. One look at them was all it took to make my expression cramp up. The treasure chest was easily as large as the ones that the bosses of the dungeons in Dolan and Arvaling had dropped, and the magic stone was as big as they came. I didn't have to appraise them to tell that they were the sort of loot you'd only get from an S-ranked monster. Actually, come to think of it. Hey, do you think that monster was this floor's boss? No, Fel said. I think not, Gun replied at the exact same moment. It wasn't. But then. The foe that awaits us at the end of the floor is slightly stronger than this one was. Correct. I know its presence well. It is a type of creature I have not crossed paths with in some time. A foe that will put up a bit more of a fight. Something to look forward to. It took me a moment to mull Fel's words over. As frigging if I'd look forward to something like that. On one hand we had my familiars, who were acting as if nothing unusual had happened at all, and on the other hand we had me and the members of ARC, who looked as if our spirits had burned themselves out and departed our bodies for greener pastures. That didn't mean we couldn't keep ourselves seated aboard Sway, fortunately, who was making its way toward a nearby island. After everything we'd just been through, I wanted nothing more than to feel my feet on solid ground and take a moment to collect myself. I thought anyone could appreciate why I'd need some time to chill after a near-death experience like I'd just had, anyone except my familiars, of course, but I ignored their grumbling and overruled their suggestion that we simply keep on moving ahead. I said that if they wanted dinner they'd have to suck it up and make landfall, which finally convinced them to begrudgingly acquiesce. Masteer, Sway sees the island. All right. Full steam ahead, Sway. Okay. Sway picked up the pace, and it wasn't long before we arrived at the beach. I jumped off the slime's back the instant I could, then flopped straight onto the ground, not even bothering to worry about getting covered in sand. It's so good to be alive, I muttered with palpable relief. I wasn't alone in that sentiment either. I lived. Grah. Phew. Really thought that'd be the end of me. As soon as this is over, I'm going to go visit my grandchild for sure. Clearly, I wasn't the only one of us who'd thought they were moments away from meeting their maker. ARC's members had finally regained their former vitality when they set foot on the island, and they weren't being shy about expressing their relief. I understood where they were coming from very well. It really did feel like we'd escaped from the clutches of death by the skin of our teeth. What a wonderful thing it is to be alive, I muttered. Right. Gadino agreed. Thank goodness we made it through. You can say that again, Gideon said. Being an adventurer means putting your life on the line. It's part and parcel with the job, and I thought I understood that, but turns out I'm not ready to die just yet after all, Sigvard added. Theodora nodded. Yeah. It really hit me that if I died here, I'd never see my grandchild again, or eat any more delicious food. The five of us spent some time celebrating our near escape, slapping each other's shoulders and basking in the joy of being alive. We'd all come to a keen understanding of our own mortality, and that shared experience had forged a real sense of solidarity between us. But man, Mukouda, do you always have to deal with stuff like that? Gideon asked with an almost concerned look on his face. Absolutely not, I replied. If it were always like that, I'd have died of a heart attack ages ago. I don't think it's ever been quite that touch and go for me before. This might be the first time I've really thought that I was dead for sure, honestly. I usually get to spend these fights cowering in the back lines. I held no illusions about my own combat capabilities. If I ever tried to get involved in my familiars' fights, becoming a liability for them would be the best I could hope to do, so I'd always made a point of giving them plenty of space and just observing when they took on high-ranking monsters. Usually. So, you're saying that you don't get that close to them, but you do take on monsters like that thing all the time? Gadino noted. Well, I muttered awkwardly. I hadn't been counting on him picking up on that. I didn't know if all the creatures we'd encountered in the past had been quite that nasty, but we certainly had fought a lot of them, and by we, I mean Fell and the others. I had no interest in hunting down megabeasts, but my familiars were such dedicated battle junkies that they never missed an opportunity to do so. We might not be marking the best show of it, but we are A-ranked adventurers, Sigvard said. We've clashed with an S-ranked monster or two in our time, but that thing was out of the question. No ordinary adventurers could ever hope to bring it down, no matter what rank they were. It's not like it's in the question for me either, I swear. Also, if I'd known it was going to be like that, I would have done everything I possibly could to stop Fell before we ended up anywhere near it. I think I've probably seen that monster in a picture book, Theodora muttered. If I'm right, it's called a Charybdis. A Charybdis? And you saw it in a picture book? Oh, you mean it was that one monster that shows up in The Hero of Light Sails the High Seas? Gideon exclaimed. He aspired to be a hero himself, so it was no surprise a book like that would be something he'd remember. That's right. I read that book to my daughter many times, so I remember it well, Fyodora said with a deep nod. A Charybdis. A monster many consider an embodiment of gluttony itself, Gadino muttered. Never thought they were real, Sigvard said. Apparently, the names Charybdis and the Hero of Light had rung a bell for Ark's other two members as well. They explained that the Hero of Light was a legendary figure who had fought for the cause of good and smote down evil at every turn. Apparently, pretty much everyone had had one of the hero's tales told to them as a bedtime story at least once over the course of their childhood, and the ultimate enemy that had shown up during the Hero of Light's seabound adventures had been a monster known as the Charybdis. Interesting. Wait. Why's everyone giving me that look? The members of Ark, for some reason, were all staring directly at me. You've had it a lot rougher than I gave you credit for, Mukouda, Gadino said. I would lose my mind if I had to deal with monsters like that all the time, Gideon added. Even if that was a special case, constantly dealing with one S-ranked monster after another would wear on any fellow's sanity, Sigvard agreed. No adventurer could take it, Fyodora said. What were you talking about, guys? It really feels like they're all starting to pity me. Am I just imagining it? Well, I'm sure if anyone can make it through all that, it's you, Mukouda. Never lose hope, Mukouda. We're all rooting for you. Stay strong. Don't die. Okay, no, seriously, what are you people saying? I just finished telling you that this was a first for me, didn't I? I hunger. Prepare a meal for us. I'm rather famished as well. Yeah, same over here. Sway's hungry too. A telepathic chorus of voices rang out to inform me it was meal time. You guys. You know I wouldn't have other adventurers pitying me if you could just be a little less battle-hungry, right? I just couldn't bring myself to accept the sudden sympathetic looks that I was getting from Ark's members. It's not like we're taking on S-ranked monsters all the time, after all. I mean, okay, so maybe we do take them on an awful lot of the time. But still, that doesn't change the fact that my familiars do basically all the work. I just sit back and watch more often than not. Heck, I wanted to be a merchant, for crying out loud. It's not like I hadn't engaged in any merchantesque work. I'd done a fair bit of business with Lambert and his company, for one thing, but I had to admit that, like it or not, my primary occupation was more or less set in stone as adventurer at this point. The more I thought about it, the more I felt like I'd been doing nothing but dungeon crawling lately. My familiars were too fond of dungeons for me to avoid them, and we always seemed to explore them from top to bottom as well. Traveling through the lower levels of a dungeon meant running into nothing but high-ranking monsters, so in a certain sense, Gadino and the others weren't really all that far from the truth. Why, you know what? I'm just not gonna think about all that stuff. I'm enjoying this lifestyle, more or less, and that's what really matters. Anyway, I think it's time to cook something. Yeah, that's the ticket. It's a blazing hot day, even though we're in a dungeon, so let's make something cold and refreshing. Maybe a chilled pasta dish? Those are nice and easy. Ah, of course. I had plenty of giant scallop meat yet, so I quickly settled on making a chilled scallop pasta. The only problem with that, of course, was that the gluttonous quartet was sure to start badgering me about the lack of real meat the second I tried to serve them a seafood-heavy dish like that one. I could cook some of my dungeon pork shabu-shabu style and put it in a chilled pasta. Pretty sure I have some thinly sliced dungeon pork already in stock, so that might actually be perfect. With that decided, my next step was to check my supply of ingredients. I already knew I had everything I needed for the scallop pasta, but as for the pork version, shabu-shabu style pork definitely calls for a sesame dressing, and that means I'll need to pick up some white sesame paste. As for the veggies, I think some Mizuna greens should do nicely. I hid behind my magic stove to make sure that nobody from Ark would see me, then purchased the sesame paste and greens I needed from my online supermarket. Alright, first things first, gotta get some water boiling. I filled up several stock pots with water, set them on my magic stove, and turned up the heat. My new magic stove and its 6 burners really makes this sort of cooking a breeze, I said to myself. I kicked things off by boiling the giant scallops and cooking the dungeon pork. I salted the water in 3 out of the 6 stockpots I'd prepared, then threw the giant scallops into them. I used the other 3 pots of unseasoned water to cook the dungeon pork shabu shabu style, swishing the meat in the boiling water for just long enough to cook it through. Once the meat was all finished and the scallops were cooked, I poured the contents of the pots into colanders to drain them, then slid everything into my magic refrigerator to cool completely. Next up, I put some more water on the stove to cook the pasta in. While that was heating up to a boil, I minced a few of Alban's homegrown onions, which I would be using in the scallop pasta's sauce, before setting them aside to soak in water. The onions Alban grew weren't unpleasantly sharp in flavor and had a nice sweetness to them, so they didn't need to soak for very long at all before I was satisfied with their flavor. I sliced some of Alban's ultra-tasty tomatoes into chunks about 1 centimeter wide as well. I could have blanched them and peeled their skin off if I'd felt like it, but I'd never been bothered by a bit of tomato skin in my pasta, so I didn't go to the trouble. Once I'd chunked up the massive number of tomatoes I would need, I drained the onions and got to work on the sauce proper. I put the minced onions into a bowl, followed by some soy sauce, olive oil, black pepper, sugar, and powdered bonito flakes, then mixed them all together and gave the result a lick to test its seasoning. Nice. Nailed it, I said to myself. I moved on to cutting up the Mizuna greens next, which I'd be using in the shabu shabu style pork pasta. I trimmed off the bases of their stalks, then chopped them up into 4 centimeter long pieces before moving on to the sauce for that pasta. This time I used white sesame paste, a bit of concentrated soup base, sugar, vinegar, sesame oil, and a scattering of whole white sesame seeds. I mixed the second sauce together, then tested it as well. All right, looking good over here too. That's when I realized that the pasta water had come to a rolling boil. Whoops. Better get that salted, I said to myself, then did just that before dumping the pasta in. I made sure to stir the pasta on occasion to keep it from clumping together while it was cooking, but in the meantime, I had a little more work to get done on the chilled side of things as well. I pulled the now cold giant scallops out of the magic fridge and cut them into bite-sized pieces, then dumped both them and the chopped up tomatoes into the bowl with the scallop pasta's sauce, mixing everything together. Next, I dumped the thinly sliced and chilled dungeon pork into its sauce bowl along with the chopped up greens and mixed them up too. By the time I was done mixing everything, the pasta was finished cooking. All that was left was to drain it, cool it down in ice water, then dump an equal quantity of pasta into both sauce bowls and mix it all together one last time. And done. It would have made the dishes a little more colorful and appetizing if I'd garnished the scallop pasta with some shredded shiso leaves and the pork pasta with some sprouts, but since both of those were sort of acquired tastes, I decided to refrain this time around. ARC's members probably weren't used to flavors like those, after all. Okay, food's ready, I called out. The whole party wasted no time gathering up to eat. I started by serving both types of pasta to my familiars. Considering how big they liked their meals to be, I knew they'd polish off 2 platefuls in the blink of an eye, then asked ARC's members which they would each prefer. Pasta was filling enough that I expected them to ask for one or the other, but I was surprised when all 4 of them requested a full serving of both varieties, then surprised once again when each of them polished off every morsel of the food they'd been served. I've never even considered eating noodles cold before, Gadino said. They're really refreshing. Not to mention delicious. Yeah, both of these are great, Gideon exclaimed. Both of them are good for sure, but I'm more a fan of the one with meat in it. It's got a richness and depth to it like nothing else, Sigvard said. They're delicious, Theodora emphatically concluded. I'm surprised you had time to taste it, considering how quickly you gobbled yours down. Theodora even asked for seconds of the scallop pasta after she was finished. Her stomach was truly a force to be reckoned with. My familiars, of course, ordered an endless onslaught of extra servings. It seemed that Gan, Dora-chan, and Sway had all taken quite a liking to cold pasta on a hot day and asked for an equal quantity of both types of pasta. Fel was the only one who grumbled about the lack of meat this time, but of course, he ended up asking for more servings of the pork pasta than anyone else. As for me, I went with a helping of the scallop pasta. Not to brag about my own cooking, but it really was both refreshing and super tasty. Nothing beats a nice, chilled dish when the weather's hot, that's for sure. As a side note, I'd made the sauce myself this time, but using a Japanese-style salad dressing as a substitute would have worked just fine for the scallop pasta, and sesame dressing would have been a great shortcut for the pork version as well. Those swaps would make the dishes as easy as could be to throw together. I used to make them all the time during summer back in my old world. Before long, we'd all finished off our pasta. I took a moment to transfer some chilled apple juice into a pitcher, then poured everyone a glass as we stopped for a moment to rest. Come to think of it, you got the drops from that Charybdis, didn't you, Mukouda? What were they? Gideon asked as he sipped his juice. He sounded keenly interested in the items. Oh, right. I noticed that too, Gadino chimed in. He seemed just as intrigued. Gotta admit, I'm curious too. You know, for future reference. Who knows what a monster like that might leave behind? Sigvard said as well. I was honestly sort of impressed that all of them had had the presence of mind to notice Sway handing the drops over to me, considering the circumstances at the time. Well, most of them, anyway. Theodora was too busy silently pouring herself another serving of apple juice, into one of the cups that I'd bought in Niehof, by the way, to join in. I couldn't help but chuckle at her free-spirited devotion to her interests as I thought back on the drops I'd gotten from the Charybdis. I'm pretty sure it left a magic stone, a tooth, and a treasure chest behind, I explained. The moment the words treasure chest left my mouth, Gadino's, Gideon's, and Sigvard's faces immediately lit up. Oh, really? Said Sigvard. A treasure chest, eh? What was in it? I'd like to know too, Gideon said. Same, Gadino agreed. Right, well, the thing is that I actually put it straight into my item box. I didn't really feel like spending too long on it after, all that, so I haven't even looked inside yet. Why don't we open it together? I was going to have to crack that box open eventually, so I figured I might as well just get it done now. I brought the Charybdis's treasure chest out from my item box, and looking at it now that I was a little calmer, I was struck by how impressive its design was. It was colored a deep, indigo blue, with patterns that I figured were meant to evoke waves, and it had a number of diamonds and pearls inlaid into it. That chest alone must be worth a fortune, Gadino muttered. I heard Gideon and Sigvard gulp as they took in the spectacle as well. It really was exceptional, the most extravagant of all the chests I'd seen up to that point, without question, and even I ended up gulping unconsciously. Oh, whoops. Almost forgot to appraise it before I opened it up. I gave it a quick, surreptitious appraisal, confirmed that it wasn't trapped, then laid a hand on its lid. Okay, here goes, I said, then slowly, cautiously cracked the Charybdis's chest open. Gadino, Gideon, Sigvard, and I all leaned forward to peek inside. For a moment, the four of us just stared in utter silence. Within the chest was a tiara, decorated with an almost absurd number of sapphires, diamonds, and pearls. Now that's one hell of a piece, Sigvard muttered. Gadino and Gideon nodded in wordless agreement. I wonder if the Adventurers Guild would want to buy this. I suggested hopefully. It was definitely valuable, but I had no use for gems, much less a studded tiara. Selling it was my only idea. Not a chance, Sigvard said. In fact, in the worst-case scenario, I could see War's Breakin out over that thing. Bwah! I yelped. It was a really bizarre sound, but the word wars had caught me so off guard, I couldn't hold it back. You know how much a pearl's worth, Mukouda? Sigvard asked. Just a normal pearl? I mean, they're not nearly as expensive as diamonds or sapphires, right? Looks like that's a no. Kay, listen up. According to Sigvard, pearls were a lot more scarce than I'd given them credit for. The big problem was that the monsters that they could be harvested from, giant pearl oysters, had been overfished to the point of near extinction a long, long time ago, and only a very small number could still be found in the modern day. To make matters worse, not every giant pearl oyster was sure to have a pearl in it. It took a long time for their pearls to form, so if they weren't old enough, you could open them up and find nothing at all. As a result, Pearls were so rare that you could only expect a few to go up on the market each year, making them tremendously valuable. They had a reputation for their elegant simplicity and their ability to draw out the charms of anyone who wore them, which led many upper-class women to be completely infatuated with them. As things stood, whenever a pearl went up for sale, you could expect wealthy women from nations far and wide to immediately descend upon it in a frenzy. So bottom line, pearls were actually more valuable than the overwhelming majority of precious stones. Sigvard had apparently only caught a single glimpse of a pearl before, when one had been sent to his village in his youth to be used as part of an accessory a member of some royal family or another had commissioned a local craftsman to make. The pearl I saw back then was smaller than the ones in that tiara, and even then, it was kept under strict guard from the start of the project to the end. I remember it like it was yesterday, and that thing's absolutely lousy with them. Not a single flaw in any of them either, as far as I can see. They're damn near perfect, each and every one, and massive. If word got out that a piece like this even existed, I don't even want to think about what would happen, truth be told. Gadino's and Gideon's expressions had gradually stiffened up over the course of Sigvard's explanation. The three of them slowly turned to face me in unison, almost as if they were silently asking me, "So, what the hell do we do with this thing?" "You know what?" I said. "Let's just pretend that none of us ever saw this, okay?" It was the only solution I could come up with. I would have liked to think that Sigvard's talk about it starting a war was an exaggeration, but after everything he just told me, it was distressingly hard to dismiss the possibility. Gah. Nope, this thing cannot make it out into the world at large. Time to pretend I saw nothing, seal it in my item box, and let it sit there for all eternity. This settles it. Nothing good can come from an encounter with a Charybdis, from start to finish.